Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining another week. Have a great show planned for you. Later on, I'll be talking all about the NFL season, which is about to kick off. But first, I'm going to start with my guest this week, who is Jessica Rine, the Executive Director of the United Way of the Upper Ohio Valley. Jess, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jamie.
I know it's a position you've been in now for just a short time, but it's one that you're very passionate about.
I am. I love the United Way. I was on their marketing committee for about 7 years before coming on board, learning from George Smolder for a full year before he retired in April, and I've been the executive director since, and it's something that's very easy to be passionate about.
That had to be beneficial to have somebody that could mentor you during your first year, and you could kind of see firsthand the way he did things, and then maybe not put your own twist on it as well.
I think anyone who's ever met George knows that he was just a heart of gold, great man. So to be able to have him as a mentor for a full year was indescribably beneficial, I think, for me. And I don't think that happens very often. You don't get to be mentored for a full year before taking on the role, but it made me feel a lot more qualified being able to learn from him.
You mentioned having been on a committee there for 7 years before coming on board, but what made you interested in going to the United Way, on a full-time basis?
I think the fact that George was going to be retiring soon, and he wanted somebody that was familiar with the organization, and being part of the marketing committee, any committees that you're involved in or boards you're involved in, you really get to know those organizations very well. So I had mentioned that I may be interested, and we had a really good discussion, and it was a pretty easy decision to make, actually. The United Way has been a big part of the community for quite a long time, and I've seen firsthand where the money goes, where the funding goes. I had done our allocations panels several years before working there, so I knew that that would be a good fit for me.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Even living here in this area for my whole life, and hearing United Way, seeing the bigger United Way, so to speak, on national television commercials and things like that, I still wasn't overly familiar with what the United Way did, and a lot of people out there may not be. So, in a nutshell, what does the United Way do, and why is it so important to the community?
Well, our United Way and United Ways across the country have the job responsibility of raising funding locally and spending it locally. United Way Worldwide tells us to fix the problems that we see locally. They're not here, they can't fix those. So 99 cents of every dollar goes right back into the community. We locate the big problems in the area, and I say we, and it's not just me and my staff, it's the whole volunteer base in the community. Any of the corporate sponsors that we have are invited to send volunteers for our allocations process, which is where they review the agencies that we have funded before and tell us how much money they think that agency needs to fix problems in the community.
Now, you're talking about in the community, the United Way of the Upper Ohio Valley. What's the reach of that organization?
We're 5 counties. It's Brooke, Ohio, Marshall and Wetzel, and Belmont County. So we have programs that a lot of them are based in Wheeling, but they serve our entire area. And then we have agencies that are specifically located in each of our counties as well.
You mentioned, identifying problems in the community. Of course, one of the big ones here has been, drug use, addiction, and you've, I know, been dealing with that in your position, and also through now hosting a program that specifically deals with that on WLUTV at West Liberty, and how'd that come to be, and what are you trying to do through that?
That's something that was a soapbox of mine to start. When I first started with the United Way, some of the questions that immediately came from the public were, what are you doing to combat the drug epidemic? So we took a really good look at the programs that we're funding, and we found that a lot of them are maybe inadvertently helping prevent the problem, because a lot of drug abuse starts with mental illness, and a lot of the programs the United Way funds have to do with mental illness. But I had this conversation with Teresa Gretchen and Jason Kegler at West Liberty, and they said that they had been wanting to put a show together for quite some time. So they asked if I would be interested in hosting, and since this is a platform I feel that needs to be addressed, I agreed. It's called Epidemic, and it airs on West Liberty Television, as you mentioned. We just got finished doing our interviews for our 3rd episode, and we're talking to first responders, to the behind the scenes people that deal with it hands-on, that maybe stories you might not understand or know. We're talking to public defenders about what they see, how they see the drug epidemic come through in repeat offenders. We talk to people that have recovered or are going through recovery on what that's like, what that withdrawal is really like, and why they started. Is it something that can be prevented? So we've been getting so many, I wouldn't say conflicting, but different views on the epidemic, how it starts, how it can be repaired. I think it's just important for people to see all aspects of it. We know the stats, but to hear all the aspects and behind the scenes has been extremely eye-opening and beneficial for me.
Teresa and Jason do a great job there, with the station up at West Liberty, and you said you're on the third episode now, and people can tune into that locally. I know on Channel 14, but how often do you plan to put out a new episode, things like that?
We started gearing to do once a month. They have a lot on their plate, especially with the sports coming into play now. So we were able to shoot a couple through the summer, but now we're thinking we're probably still going to stick with once a month. And there's a Facebook page which is called Epidemic, and it has the full stream of each episode on there as well.
Oh, that's great. So you can go right to WLUTV's website and then get onto the Epidemic page and follow that along.
Right.
It's good sometimes to be on the other end of the camera, not having the questions that's been able to do the talking. I like it sometimes being able to ask the questions like I'm doing here with you, but it is fun to sometimes be on this side of it as well. But one of the things that I think could be real beneficial through that program is educating the public as well and realizing, hey, these aren't quote unquote bad people, and I think people have started to learn that anyway, because it's touched almost every family, every person you could think in some way here in the Valley. Mm-hmm. So they know somebody, they're related to someone, they've got a friend. But I think that educational things like this also help people with tools on what they can do to help, which is something we really need to know is, how can I help this situation?
Right, and I think everyone that we've talked to at this point, whether they're a recovering addict, a first responder, someone that's behind the scenes that has worked with addicts, everybody says the community has to come together, and a lot of that is perception. People hear of somebody who was a drug addict and they give this whole view that is probably not even close to accurate. It is the common person. I believe it's a white male in their mid-30s are the likely people in West Virginia that have been dying from drug overdose. And when you're a first responder and you report, it's not the scene you would think with needles scattered everywhere in a dark room. It could be a businessman with a short shirt sleeve rolled up in a car in a parking lot. That's where first responders have to go to. So they know that it's not what's commonly perceived. Also, people think that if somebody is a recovering addict, they will definitely go back into it, because once you're an addict, you're always an addict. But we have people that we've talked to that have been out of it for 20 years and they fight it every single day. But that should be admired. It's not necessarily a sketchy past. It could be because of, a prescribed opioid. It could be some of the people that we've talked to have said they just didn't fit in when they were kids. Some say that they had an injury that they had to recover from. There's not one type of person. So I think what I've found so far is that we have to stop that perception of what we think a drug addict is, and that it's this person that had this whole sketchy past and this horrible upbringing. That's simply not the case.
We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about some events that are upcoming at the United Way. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
When reviewing your oil and gas offers or royalty check statements, do you wonder, am I being offered a fair amount? Do I feel comfortable reading the statement? Do I have peace of mind? If you answered no to these questions, you need Bordas Mineral Management. Our passion is helping mineral owners protect and expand their mineral wealth. Our examiners tell you whether you're being treated fairly and getting paid what is rightfully yours. Bordas Mineral Management. Be protected. Have peace of mind.
Recommended by the highest authorities. Danoon Lumber.
Looks like a bad one's coming. Yeah. Right?
Welcome back to the show. I've been speaking with my guest this week, Executive Director of the United Way of the Upper Ohio Valley, Jessica Rine. We're talking about the ways that United Way helps the community, but some big events coming up for the United Way itself here in the upcoming weeks.
We have Day of Caring coming up, which is our volunteer day, our big kickoff day. It's the Sandy O'Haver Day of Caring. She was a former associate director who actually ended up passing away last year, but it's named after her because she put so much hard work and energy into it. This year we have over 40 companies, which is our record. We've never had this many companies partake, and we have more volunteers than we've ever had, over 340 volunteers.
And that's this coming Wednesday, September 12th, and the day kicks off at in the 7 o'clock hour, and I guess there's some historical significance to that. But
the only historical difference is that they wanted it to not be something normal, so it's 7:52, and that was just so people would remember. So it wouldn't be 8 o'clock, wouldn't be 7:55. So there's no significance to the 52. It was just to be remembered.
But it's a tradition now.
It is a tradition.
So the way this works, I guess the day kicks off at 7:52, and then different companies volunteer and they go out into the community to different United Way programs or agencies and go and perform whatever type of service needs to be done there for the day?
Yes, and it's actually not just United Way agencies. We open it up to all agencies that serve the Upper Ohio Valley. So that's exactly right, though. We have different people that sign up to do different jobs at different places. So there can be things as far as landscaping or painting or filing or book organizing. We have some members from AEP that come on and do a little bit of wiring or tree trimming that needs done in those respects. So there's a lot of different jobs that are done that day.
Well, so you said 40 this year, maybe you can hit 50 next year. Maybe we'll put a little plug in there. I'm sure you'll take all the help you can get from whichever businesses want to chip in, right?
Absolutely. These agencies give to the community all year long. So this is the one day of year that we organize for everyone to give back to them.
And now, you mentioned that the San Diego Haver Day of Caring kicks off the campaign, and that's the annual campaign that United Way does every year to try to raise money, and so that kicks off next week as well.
It's a big time for us. We actually have 2 fundraising events in the month of September in addition to Day of Caring. But the kickoff of the campaign for us is letting people know that it's available, that now you can do an employee campaign. We're accepting corporate donations, which of course we're accepting donations all year long, but it's our time as a company and as a board to come together, focus, start sending out letters. We have a campaign cabinet who are our volunteers that are kind of the feet on the ground for solicitation for our campaign. So it's a really big time for us. Lots of mailings, lots of event planning, lots of volunteer planning, and hopefully through I guess the majority of fall and into winter is when a lot of those pledges start to come in, and it's a big time for us. But we're working all year round, doing fundraisers all year. This is just the official kickoff of our campaign.
You mentioned the events coming up. One on the reverse raffle, kind of held every year, and that's something that's a big fundraiser for the United Way.
Yeah, it's our board event. Most nonprofit organizations have their board event. This is a traditional thing for us, but we've changed it a little bit this year. We actually have gone to some events that Wheeling Islands had. I know that Wheelhouse Creative has an event. I really like the idea of the separate different places where people can go get food instead of one long buffet line. So we're changing things up there. We're going to have an open bar this year. The raffle is $5,000 is the top prize. We're having a silent auction, and thank you, Bordas, for being a sponsor of that. But we're really excited about the changes this year. We think it's going to be beneficial. You can purchase the raffle tickets for $100, or you can choose to come and join us for the evening.
And what's the date of that event?
It's the 18th, September 18th.
And that's right at the Wheeling Island Casino.
It is, in the showroom.
Now, people may wonder, okay, why should I give to the United Way if I'm going to make a contribution, as opposed to picking my favorite charity and saying I'm going to go out and write a check to them directly?
That's something that I was asked very early on, and I wanted to make sure we had a really good answer to that, and we do now. Prior to this, we funded agencies. So essentially, we would write a check to that agency, and they would spend it on the needs of that agency. Early last year, we started focusing on program specific. So we restricted that funding. So they had to focus on something concerning health, education, or financial stability, which is what the United Way believes are the 3 main pillars that can help any community. So that's what we fight for: health, education, financial stability. So now the programs that we fund inside the agencies are geared down specifically to those 3 problems. So if you're donating to an agency, which we don't discourage at all, but if you're donating to them, chances are that goes into that general fund. If you're donating to us, we can tell you programs specifically for each agency, exactly where those dollars are going to help a bigger issue.
Now, let's say that I want to donate and say I just want to help the drug epidemic, as we've already talked about during the show. Can I write a check then to the United Way and say I want this specifically to go to help programs that are fighting the drug epidemic, and then you'll distribute it accordingly, or how does that work?
We can. We're a giving plan, essentially. If you want to give to an agency that's a United Way agency, then we will earmark that money and send it to the United Way agency. If you want to donate to an agency, if pets are your thing, United Way doesn't traditionally fund pet type of programs. But if you want to earmark to a certain animal shelter, that's fine. We'll take that money and pass it along to them as well. And we can do that through payroll deduction or simply with a letter written with your check on how you'd like to see your funding go. We can take care of all of that for you.
A lot of good things going on. Sounds
you.
like you've got it going the right way. I can't let you leave here today without asking about the Steelers. I know you're a huge Pittsburgh Steelers fan.
I am.
Season kicks off here soon. How do you think the season's going to look?
I think we're still kind of up in the air a little bit. There's a lot of changes to that final roster. I'm always confident. I'm always very, I don't want to sound like a Cleveland Browns fan, but it's Super Bowl for me every year. So I really think that we have a good run at it this year, and I'm looking forward to seeing how things unfold.
Sounds good. Well, I'll be talking a little bit more about the Steelers later on the show. You can stick around and watch, or you can tune in on the evening or on the morning shows and see what I had to say about that. But I really appreciate you being here on the show, and congratulations and good luck with all the stuff you continue to do with the United Way.
Thank you, and thanks for your continued support.
Sure thing. We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking all about the NFL. The season gets underway here this week. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
You earned it. Let us help you save it. Belmont Savings Bank. Focused on your future.
So, how was your first day?
Long. So, Josh asked me about you.
Daddy's home. Go get him.
For your home, for your life, for more than 50 years. The Hardwood Specialists. DeNoon Lumber.
Welcome back to the show. It's time to talk sports. We're going to start off talking about the NFL and really two big stories dominating for the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. First of all, still no Le'Veon Bell. As of the time of this taping here on Wednesday afternoon, did not show up for the Wednesday meetings this morning with the team. Of course, didn't show up for Mondays either. Tuesday was a day off, so a lot of people thought, well, he'll show up on Wednesday for sure. Now looking more and more like Le'Veon Bell could miss week one and maybe even to the extended future. Now, you got to remember, he's not under contract. He's been tagged by the Steelers with their franchise tag, meaning that he's not under contract, but he can only play for the Steelers, and he has to play for $14.5 million if he decides he's going to play. But every week that he misses, he loses out on about $900,000 for every game he misses. But his agent now hinting around that he may be willing to take some pay cut or lose some money in the short term in order to protect his long-term value. And that means that Le'Veon Bell could potentially not show up all the way up until week 10 that he has to play under the franchise tag. Now again, he wouldn't get paid. He would lose about $900,000 each week that he doesn't play. But who knows how this may all end. We'll have to keep an eye on it, but looking more and more like Le'Veon Bell may not be there for week one, which means the Steelers will have to look to the other running backs that they have now on the roster. James Conner, of course, second-year guy out of Pitt who missed a lot of time last year. Samuels looked really good in the preseason here. Ridley, a guy that, should be able to get some carries. So I think it'll be a little bit of running back by committee with James Conner kind of leading the way, and he's looked good in the preseason. But, the thing with Le'Veon Bell is that he's so dynamic that you got the running ability, the ability to go out and line up wide and throw the ball to him. He's just, kind of a unique player in that regard, and that's why he wants paid the way that he does. I don't hold it against Le'Veon Bell. People want to talk about him holding out. He's not holding out. He is not under contract. As I've said time and time again, I hate this NFL rule that allows franchises to tag a player where you're not under contract, but you can only play for this team, even though you're not under contract. I think they should have to come to a long-term deal with him. If not, then he should be able to go play somewhere else. So, I see it both ways for the teams. But the other big news coming out of Steelers world this week is the cutting of Landry Jones. Big surprise there. You know, Landry Jones has been the backup quarterback for a number of years, and with the way that Josh Dobbs played, especially in the final preseason game against Carolina, did enough to really go out and impress the team to say, hey, we're going to hang on to Josh Dobbs. We think he's got a future here, and we think he can be a capable backup, especially while Mason Rudolph is being groomed to be, and it seems to be the heir apparent to Ben Roethlisberger down the road. So 3 quarterbacks on the roster, but not particularly the 3 that people were expecting perhaps. Hopefully those backups aren't needed and Big Ben stays healthy, because really the season won't reach its full potential without Big Ben in there. He's, knock on wood, had pretty good luck staying healthy. Hopefully that stays the same this year. Now this week, of course, the Steelers kick off in Cleveland against the Browns, who were 0-16 last year, looking to be better this year. This concerns me a little bit. On the road, the Browns, 0-16 last year. No, it doesn't. It doesn't concern me. The Steelers were going to win big. They'll win by double digits. Too much talent compared to the Browns. The Steelers are going to go out hungry to win this first game. I think the defense is improved. They've shored up some of the places they needed to get better in the secondary. I think it'll be the pass rush will get after Cleveland, and I think it'll be a good start to the season for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I also think throughout this season, the kicking game is going to continue to be big. I think re-signing Boswell, extending him to 5 years, getting him under contract for the long term was a good move here in the offseason, and I think that will be key with some of the games during the course of the season this year. So I think Steelers by double digits this week, and propels them to what I think will be a 12-4 season for the Steelers. I think they're going to have a really good season and be a playoff team again, win the division. I also in the AFC think like the Patriots to make the playoffs. The Raiders, I think with John Gruden, a lot of people talk about what he's doing out there with the roster, letting Mac go to the Browns. I like what John Gruden, I think he's just a fantastic football mind. I think he'll get the Raiders into the playoffs. I like the Jaguars to get there again. Of course, knocked off the Steelers last year with the big 45-42 playoff win in Pittsburgh. Chiefs get back there, and a lot of people won't like this, but I'm going to say the Baltimore Ravens find their way back into the playoffs this year. I just think that the Ravens, over the course of the past decade and a half, have been a steady franchise. I don't think you're going to keep them out of the playoffs for too long. I think they'll find their way back into the playoffs. In the NFC, I like the Packers. The Eagles, of course, the defending Super Bowl champions, to get back to the playoffs. The New Orleans Saints, I like any Drew Brees quarterback team. The Atlanta Falcons, Matt Ryan doing good things down there. The Rams, and then I also like the Dallas Cowboys to get back to the playoffs. I know my son Luke is rooting for the Cowboys because of the Tavon Austin being in Dallas. He's a big Mountaineer fan, so he always follows Tavon wherever he goes. So we had to kind of set aside our Rams stuff in the house and get some Cowboy stuff out, much to my being upset about that. But I do think the Cowboys will find their way back in there. I think that, Dak Prescott, Zeke Elliott, 2 good, young, dynamic players, and I think the Cowboys will get back in there. My Super Bowl pick, believe it or not, I'm going to go the same thing I did last year. Didn't pan out last year. I'm going to go Steelers over Packers again this year. I just think when you get Aaron Rodgers, he can find ways to win games. I think that will get them to the Super Bowl, but the Steelers win it this year at the Super Bowl in Atlanta to get another ring for the Steel City. We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking college football, talk about last week's games and what lies ahead. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show. People in nursing homes are some of the most vulnerable members of our society. They're there because they can't take care of themselves. Those facilities have a duty to take care of our loved ones, and when they don't, it's important they're held accountable. We've not only collected record results against negligent nursing homes, but more importantly, we've helped so many families get the answers and closure they so badly needed.
Bordas and Bordas, fighting for justice.
Disasters happen. Pick the team that takes care of them all. Powered by offices in Wheeling, Morgantown, and Pittsburgh, Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration is ready to handle any size emergency at a moment's notice. We have the right people, knowledge, and equipment to respond 24 hours a day.
I'm Dana Hogerson. When disaster strikes your home or business, tell your insurance provider you prefer the restoration company the Mountaineers call, Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration.
Welcome back to the show. Let's talk a little college football. Last week started out great for me. Hit all 4 of my Saturday picks. I had WVU by 17. They won. Notre Dame by 3, they won by 7. Ohio State by 21, they won by even more than that. Had Auburn by 4 and hit that one almost on the nose. And then Sunday and Monday came, and the state of Florida. My goodness, Miami being blown out. Florida State taking it on the chin. I had both of those teams winning. College football in the state of Florida isn't what it used to be. So, some good ones and then a couple ones that I missed there on Sunday, Monday. I'll chalk it up to them not being Saturday games. But, this week, I think some interesting games out there. Last weekend, a big statement weekend for the SEC. Alabama, Auburn, LSU, all with important out-of-conference wins. Let's set up your Saturday for this week. 1 o'clock, UCLA at Oklahoma on Fox. UCLA was upset by Cincinnati last week in Chip Kelly's debut out at UCLA. Kyler Murray, awfully impressive as the quarterback at Oklahoma, taking over for Baker Mayfield. But Oklahoma may be too impressed with itself coming off that win. But Chip Kelly's going to make some adjustments coming off that loss last week. But Oklahoma's going to have just too much talent. It's in Norman. I'll take the Sooners to pull away at the end. Oklahoma by 17. Then at 3:30, Georgia at South Carolina on CBS. You can watch that right here on WTRF. And Will Muschamp is a defensive coordinator by background. He's the head coach at South Carolina. I think Georgia is ripe for an upset. They had a great year last year, had a kind of a cupcake game in their opener here this year. I think the Gamecocks pull off the upset in a relatively low-scoring game. I'll take South Carolina in this one as my upset this week. Also at 3:30, Ohio State gets Rutgers and Notre Dame gets Ball State. Those should both be big wins for Ohio State and Notre Dame. Same for WVU at 6 o'clock. They take on Youngstown State. Will Greer, awfully good last week. Career high in passing yardage. Kicked off a great start to his Heisman campaign. Then at 7 o'clock on ESPN, number 2 ranked Clemson at Texas A&M. Clemson better be careful. I've been saying that for a couple weeks now. This is a really dangerous game for them. They're still fooling around with the quarterback position between the freshman and then Kelly Bryant, who started last year. I think Clemson pulls it out late, but they better be careful or they could get knocked off. And then 8 o'clock, ABC, Penn State at Pitt. One of the games I loved when I was a kid. Penn State needed overtime last week. They lost 2 years ago at Heinz Field to Pitt, that probably kept them out of the playoff that year. I think Penn State wins by at least 14 coming off of that close overtime win against Appalachian State last week. They'll have their radar up this week. Then 8:30 on Fox, number 17 USC at number 10 Stanford, 2 ranked teams. Stanford likes to muscle you. They had a tough time running the ball last week. Bryce Love with like 30 yards rushing in the game. He was the Heisman candidate. USC just has too much speed, I think, for Stanford, especially the way the Stanford's running game has gone so far. I like the Trojans to win by double digits in this one. Oklahoma, Clemson, Georgia, Stanford, all top 10 teams I think could get knocked off this week. I don't think they all will. I do think Georgia and Stanford will go down as top 10 teams, opening the door for some other teams like WVU to move up in the rankings. WVU up to number 14 now this week. Of course, Notre Dame went all the way up to 8 with the big win over Michigan last week. Another exciting week of college football here ahead of us. That's all the time that we have this week. Really appreciate Jessica Rine being here on the show. Really looking forward to the Steelers kicking off. We'll talk about that next week. Thanks for joining in. We'll see you next time on the Jamie Bordas Show.